Hello everybody and welcome to Facebook Friday with Neuroendocrine Cancer, and I am Kate Wakelin, the Net Patient Support Nurse with Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia. It's the 20th of November. Gosh, and the year is just flying past. So hi to everybody who's joining us live, and also big hello to anyone who's catching up on this conversation via our YouTube channel. You can see that I've got a guest with me today, and I'll be introducing you to Dr Amanda Hordern a little bit more in just a sec. But before we go any further, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm broadcasting to you from, which is the land of the Wurundjeri people. And I would just, Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I would just like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. One of the things I love about living on this very special land is the Yarra River and being able to run along the Yarra River. And in the Woi Wurrung language, that's called the Birrarung. So I'm reminded every time I go for a run how special it is to live where I live, and so I'm greatly appreciative and very grateful for that. Just before we launch into our topic of the day, I also wanted to just give a shout out to our South Australian unicorns, who this week have had a real very real taste of what Melbourne was going through a few weeks ago, which is the very harsh lockdown because of some coronavirus cases. So we're just thinking of you over in South Australia, and just wanted to say, if you're having trouble with anything really related to that lockdown or your situation, I know that lots of you had treatment and scans over the next week, and it's just really sort of flared up that anxiety and just that sense of, oh my goodness, you know, not only am I navigating NETs, but now I'm navigating NETs in a pandemic. So shout out to me if there are particular issues that you're grappling with. We may well be able to help you navigate those things. We've got some pretty direct contacts in the health system. So if you're struggling with that, then please do let me know. And I can see a couple of people have joined us, so that's really fantastic to have you along. And I am super excited to introduce Dr. Amanda Hordern. Now, Dr. Amanda Horton, I met Amanda probably nearly 25 years ago, and she was running training when I was a bit more of a baby nurse, and the training was in talking with patients about cancer and sexuality. Can you believe it? It was actually a long time ago, but since then I've had the privilege of working directly alongside Amanda, and over that time we've woven in and out of our lives, each other's lives, and in that time Amanda's actually completed her PhD into sexuality and cancer. And so this is a follow-up from last week's conversation where we had a chat with me about some of the more nursey type stuff, and I'm really excited that we've got Amanda to give us a follow-up session today, and we're going to be talking a bit more about, I guess, some of that confidence and the emotional aspect of managing intimacy and sexuality whilst we're in the midst of something to do with cancer. So Amanda's got a cancer nursing and palliative care background in a similar way to me, but she's also an accredited hypnotherapist, and she's done lots and lots and lots of training and workshops and writing and research. So fantastic to have you along, Amanda. Tell me what I've missed out on, and welcome to Facebook Friday. Yeah, I know you can't see our lovely group, where there's comments sort of flowing through the side feed already, so I'll be feeding those questions through to us as we talk. But yeah, let me know what have I missed when I introduced my dear old friend. Not that you're old, but you're
and I am old. I'm surprised that we actually first met when I was banging on about sex, and I can't believe it's been quite that long. But really I can. And it's got to the stage where my husband says, as he sees me carrying a bag of boas, like, he just starts saying, "Oh, can we just stop talking about it? Can you just come home and do it?" And he's been saying that for quite a long time now. So it is a really important topic, and it did start to become more prevalent to me as a nurse, like you said, like where we both originated from, and in the wards where I didn't know the answers, and patients would sometimes say things to me, and can I tell you the story of how I
would love it if you could tell me the story, because I think it helps put everything more in context. I know I've heard the story before, but the people listening won't have. And Look, I think one thing from being a cancer nurse for such a long time is that if someone is hesitant about asking me a question, usually there's 20 more people who want to know the answer to that question. So, yeah, if you could tell us the story, that I think is a really great seed setter.
I will. But before I even do that, it's really great that you raised the topic. And I did look at your YouTube or your Friday session last week, and I was really touched that you raised it. You did it beautifully, and I've pretty much thought, well, Kate's done the talk, but it's always nice. I just did 2 sessions, sequential weeks as well, with a big group of health professionals in the Geelong area in regional Victoria. And it was great to have 1 week and then for people to think about what was going on for them, what was coming up, how some of this theory may translate to their personal life or the professional life in this case as well. So it is nice that you've done the whole background and you've raised really important topics and you've done it beautifully. And then I'll just add, or we'll just weave in and into that as well and expand it wherever your lovely group want to take it. But the story really did happen when I was a night duty nurse. So I was a cancer nurse and it was in a busy, big city hospital. And I still remember that I was on night duty and I had a torch in my hand and I was weaving my way down the corridor with my group of patients that were in my care for the night. And I was checking the drip of somebody who I was assuming was asleep. And she said, and she was the same lady who the day before had her head over a bucket, vomiting profusely and was very unwell with very low blood counts, very high aggressive, toxic chemotherapy in those days. And we were just wondering whether we were going to be taking her to intensive care, like it was that sick. And then, so this is the next day, and I'm measuring and watching her drips, assuming she's sound asleep. And she said, "Hey, Amanda, can you have sex when you're having that stuff go through you?" And I kind of thought, am I hearing things here? And I was really glad that the torch was on the IV and then it was on her and it wasn't on my very embarrassed face, because I didn't know how to answer that at all. And I must have just taken a really long, slow, deep breath. And just as I was about to say, look, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you. And she said, "Well, that's too late because we just had sex in the patient lounge while you were in handover." And I still remember going, oh, like, do I applaud her or do I imagine the position that she must have done it in with that drip pole? And I was trying to imagine what kind of angle you would get in that little tiny patient lounge. And all of these things were going on in my head as a health professional. But the bottom line was that I felt really inadequate because I had no idea how to answer her question and how to celebrate or how to connect or empathize with her on a more emotional level. So I, of course, scurried back to the nurses' station at the end of my round. And I said to the group of nurses, and there was a lovely doctor there, and I said, "Look, does anyone," I was flipping through books because in those days there was no Google, and hard to believe. And I was flipping through books, and of course there's nothing there about sexuality or even body image and self-esteem in those days. And I said to my colleagues, "Well, I've just had this question, and how should I answer it?" And the first response to one of my colleagues was, "Oh my God, surely they've got more important things to do." And the other one piped up, "Well, we're going to lock that patient lounge next time we have handover." And the doctor was just nodding, just going, "Look, I can check with my consultant tomorrow. Look, I don't know either." And when I said, well, it was too late, we really were just all in like we don't know how to answer this. And it happened a long time before I started to work then at the Cancer Council, which is where we also met each other and worked together. And it was almost like a synchronous moment where this very larger than life boss of mine, Doreen Ackerman, who ran the cancer helpline at the time and the Cancer Council Information Service, and she threw this book on my desk, which I've probably got in my room over there, called the Betty Dobson Sex for One. She threw it on the desk, and I'd been there a week. And she said, "Look, read this and join me for a workshop tonight." And I kind of just jumped and looked at it, and I started flicking through the pages, and there's these pictures of people's labias and their vulvas, and just all these women were being encouraged to arrange them to make them feel more comfortable. And I thought, well, this is my chance. Like, maybe I better find out more about this. And so I started going to these workshops with Doreen, very much the participant and the learner and the very curious. I buried myself in books to try and find more information. And eventually I started to feel more comfortable and confident to talk about the topic. And also to know, as you said so beautifully, that, that sex it can be important to each of us in a very different way, and that our definition of sexual well-being, or our sense of purpose and our intimate connection with ourself and our body, changes over time, changes through different stages of our life, and it means different things to different people at different times of our lives. And so that's really how, and the other really little add on to that story is that, and I didn't think of this until I started writing a book, that my mum actually forbade me to go to sex education classes when I was in primary school. Wasn't allowed to go for a whole lot of reasons. And I was writing away this book on sex and cancer, and I was thinking, oh my God, I think I've spent my whole life getting back at my mother. I've done it. So yeah, so that's the truth. Yeah.
As you mentioned, Doreen Ackerman, who was the director of the unit we were both working at in the Cancer Council. Yeah. I remember when I came back from having my second baby, first day back after maternity leave, and she plops this large container of water-based lubricant on my desk. So this was very standard Doreen. And I think she's there's a legacy from Doreen in that she sometimes pushed us way outside of our comfort zones, but I think a lot of health professionals need a little bit of a push out of our comfort zones, because we know, and this is, I think I talked about this last week about your research, Amanda, that was really demonstrating that for patients, they need their health professionals to feel okay and comfortable and about answering questions about this, because it's often really awkward, but also that the patients were feeling like if it was important, then my health professional would raise it with me. And the health professionals were all thinking, well, if it was important for my patients, they would ask me. And I know your patient asked you, but I also know that it takes a fair bit of courage to come out there and ask the question. So I think as health professionals, part of the work that you've done is allowed us to acknowledge that actually this is a really important question for people, and we need to get ourselves a bit more comfortable talking about it and encourage our patients to ask questions, which is, I guess, part of the reason why we're doing these two videos is, so the people who are viewing feel like this is a reasonable, legitimate area of your health that it's okay to ask your doctor or nurse or social worker or, your health GP, your health professional about.
Yeah, and some of the questions, like when I was looking at your presentation, I was thinking, some of the actual ways to do that, because even though you talk about my research, which I completed in 2004, but we've had it replicated nationally and internationally again and again and again. But then, last week speaking and this week speaking to this big group of health professionals, the issues were still the same. They were still coming up from people who genuinely wanted to not put their foot in it, not embarrass their patients. And one big group of nurses from this cafe that were Zooming in said, look, if they bring it up, if they start the conversation, we'll talk forever. But how do I get past that? How do we just start the conversation? And so maybe what we can weave into today's talk is just some comfortable ways to just to bring it up with your health professional, but also just practicing with a friend or in front of a mirror. Like I had to practice these presentations in front of a mirror, especially when it came to the tricky words like vaginismus. I didn't even know how to spell it or what on earth it meant, but or coital or libido, all of these tricky medicalized words that we hide behind as health professionals, which I think we hide behind to just protect us from being too vulnerable in having these discussions, and but also just to feel okay about talking about dry vaginas and blood in urine, or those kind of things that sometimes can be a bit tricky to talk to girlfriends or male friends about as well. So not only health professionals, but also partners and prospective partners, if you're interested in starting a new relationship, taking a new relationship that step further, or reinventing an older or a more familiar relationship with a very changed body. And so all of those situations require just opening lines. And as you said so beautifully last week, nearly everything does boil down to communication, and lubrication can be very helpful as well. So hopefully we'll come back to my favorite lubrication. So yeah.
That sounds fantastic. And maybe that's a good place to start, Amanda. How do we start the conversation? So, if out of watching these couple of videos, you know, people who are watching are going, well, clearly there's more to talk about here. I need to either ring Kate. Hopefully, if you're ringing me, hopefully you can just say, I just watched the Facebook Friday on sexuality, and hopefully you'll feel, maybe I'm kidding myself, that you'll feel comfortable, because it is an uncomfortable topic. But, you know, if people need to talk with their doctor or another health professional, what would be opening lines? It's like practicing asking someone out for a date, isn't it? It's like, well, how would I start that conversation?
Yeah, and like you said last week, there are some lines that are printed out that Doreen and I wrote in the Cancer and Sexuality book for the Cancer Council as well.
And I've got that here. So let's do the plug nice and early. So this is the book.
So in the back of there are some opening lines of how to talk about it with a partner and how to talk about it with a doctor. But so a lot of people feel really comfortable just making it more general, just about body confidence, or you know, intimate words, and including patients or people with affected by cancer, but also health professionals often feel more comfortable talking about intimacy. And so a really common way to do it is just saying, look, I've noticed there's a lot of changes of the more intimate nature, or, you know, some people just say, look, it's really dry down there, you know, what on earth am I going to do? Men will often say to me, look, I've got something wrong in the tool shed down below, and, you know, that things aren't quite right in the more personal areas. So, but they're all very broad ways of really saying, how do I live with these changes? And some of them are sexual, some of them are intimate, some of the body images. So it's really, it's just pitching it to what you personally feel comfortable with. And I've had some really funny ones, like the tool shed down below and the dingle dangles in the wind, and this woman who rang me once, and she just said, look, I'm so dry. And I said, yeah, I'm hearing that you're really dry. And she said, I can't even sit in a pair of jeans. I'm so dry up there. And I could imagine her on the phone just going, oh, right up there, you know. And so I didn't really need any more information other than to, you know, explain that there are differences between lubrication and vaginal moisturizers and estrogen creams as well. But, you know, so sometimes in the book, in the Cancer Helpline book, there's a couple of lines on just, you know, look, I'm worried that you may be interested in sex, but I just don't feel ready for the more, you know, the penetration. I don't feel ready to go all the way, but I just want you to hold me. I want you to hug me. And there was a beautiful lady who I'll never forget, because she just said it so perfectly, and she was so brave in front of like 300 people at a Dallas Brooks Hall, when Dallas Brooks Hall existed in Melbourne. And I was the last speaker for the night. And after a whole panel, and we had to sit there at the panel, and the audience could direct their questions. And so I did my, you know, lubrication and communication 15 minutes, which is very hard to speak for 15 minutes only. And she put her hand up and she said, I'm going to direct this question to Amanda. And I immediately went, oh, you know, like, you know, what, have I offended her? You know, is it okay? What's she going to say? And she said, I agree with Amanda, what she said. Do you know what sex is for us? And you could hear the whole audience just pause and just go, oh, too much information. What's she going to say? And she said for 3 minutes every morning, and everyone went, oh, too much information. And she said, we just hold each other for 3 minutes, and we breathe in together, and we breathe out together, and we breathe in together, and we breathe out together. And she said, we just feel the skin. I hear his heart. I just feel, and she says that sets it up. That is what sex is for us. We start our day like that, and it just feels intimately connected to this guy. And the facilitator was very clever, and she said at the end, well, I think that's, and everyone's like, oh, so beautiful, including me. And so she wrapped it up, and she said, well, that's a really nice note to finish on. And I was putting my laptop, we had to bring our own laptops and stuff in those days. And I was throwing it in the back of the car, and this bloke calls out, hey, he obviously forgot my name, and he goes, hey, and I looked at him and I could see her behind him, and I went, she's the lady. And he was there nudging her as she was saying this. And he said, well, the truth is, love, that it's the only way to keep her quiet for 3 minutes a day. And he went roaring off with laughter. And I was like, oh, no. And then, you know, I was driving home going, well, if that's what keeps them happy, you know, if that is what makes them intimately connect, then that's great. You know, like, who are we to judge that whether that's good sex life or a bad one? So for new partners, we used to run workshops at the Cancer Council, quite a few, and I was always watching out or listening out for the biggest message that I could pass on to say, here's the line, you know, here's the opening line, here's the pickup line, you know, something like, okay, I'll order a gin and tonic, I've had a shit year. And by the way, you know, I've had cancer, but how about it? You know, and it wasn't going to ever be anything like that. And I was there curious, but also knowing that the groups would teach me something, as you know, all groups that we've run, as you know as well, they always teach us more than we teach them. And I came to the conclusion that there isn't one formula to ask questions, and everything comes back to just feeling comfortable in yourself, in your own definition of, well, what does sexuality and intimacy mean for myself? And what's the one thing that I would like to change right now, and what would be the next step, and what would I see, and what would I feel, and what would I know? And so it's just starting in those ways that it's about, if you're not comfortable about it, and you're squirming, then it's really difficult to get your message out, and there's going to be assumption, like you said last week, that it's just about, you know, wham bam, thank you ma'am. And when that's not possible, then there's a lot of grief and loss, of course, as well. And there's a lovely story that there was a woman in my clinic, and I asked her those questions. I said, well, what would you like? You know, a younger woman, fairly advanced cancer, and in a single relationship. And I just said, you know, how has all this affected you as a woman, in terms of how you feel about your body, how you connect to your body? You know, what's your spark like? What's your mojo like? Because she used to talk about mojo. And, you know, how do you feel sexually and intimately about yourself? And she just looked up at the ceiling, and she was just wondering, and she had this big smile on her face. And she said, you know what? I'll be listening to Italian music, I'll be making pasta, and I'll be wiggling my hips in this really exciting and arousing way. And she said, I might be alone, I might be in company, but then I know I'm reclaiming my body, I'm reclaiming my mojo, I'm reclaiming my spark, and then I know I'm on my way, because my mind's out of the, will it hurt, and what if it doesn't work, and will they still love me? And so it is just really coming back to just that, re-navigating what it is right now that you want, and you know, and how do I ask for that, and how do I set boundaries on, this is what we used to do, but things have changed now, so we can start really slowly. You know, I often put people out of bounds, the penetration out of bounds, and to say, well, Amanda said don't do that for 6 weeks, because we've got lots of work to do in terms of resetting the mind and re-sparking the body first, and then that kind of gives them more time to have fun and play as well.
So there was a couple of, there's been so many gems in what you've just said to us, Amanda. Like, one of the things I loved about that story that you told about the holding, the lady with the story of, this is what sex means to me. But then the quip from the bloke was, you know, this is how I keep it quiet. I think that was a really lovely clue that humour is actually really important in all of this. And, you know, maybe never so much required as when our bodies are making funny noises, or when our bodies maybe not looking as elegant as, or behaving as elegantly as we might really have wanted them to do. And maybe we're not as young as we used to be either. But the other thing that you just said then, which I think I'd love to take a bit further, it just struck me that you talked about this lady who was single, not that she was single, but actually that she's in a single relationship, that and that just really, the way you described that opened to me the possibility that, and it's a myth that we talked about last week, is that single people can't be sexual, or that single people will only be sexual if they've got a partner, or the partner's like the pinnacle of self-actualization, and actually being single is in itself a relationship. And I think when I've read your work, and I've read other work, actually I think that's really stood out to me to be really important, is what you were saying, is you actually got to be really getting to know what you want yourself, and what you're enjoying, and how your body's going to work yourself, before you can actually start to entertain ideas about partnered sexual experiences. I wondered if you could talk to us a bit more about that, and maybe
so I think because it's so true what you said, and I loved that you raised that topic. And so many people have said in workshops, and as you know, clients in my own practice, that that they feel discriminated against, as if it's assumed that they're asexual, or that just isn't important. But I know from the health professional side that they're not wanting to rub their nose in the fact that they're single, or they just forget to check. Well, they were listed single when they were admitted, but you know, 5 years later, is that have you thought about having a partner? Have you thought about starting a new relationship, and how's that going? And But having put all of that aside, the ways that we do, it's called sensate focus in the sex therapy kind of world. There's a lot of literature and there's a lot of science behind, and it came out of the rehabilitation, like where people were having, paraplegia or quadriplegia, where there was a perception that they couldn't feel and be aroused or have a tingle or have an orgasmic response or even have just a sensual response of any sort, from the neck down or from the waist down, because of these, very severe injuries. And there's a wonderful woman who, and I am going to ask you a question, there's a wonderful woman who really inspired me. And I'm laughing because I had so many assumptions. So I research and say, don't, check your assumptions and don't judge a book by its cover and always ask. And this woman gets on stage at this World Sexology Conference, which happened to be in Sydney. And Dorian and I were there, and we're very exciting and very excited, but very bored after about the first day, thinking it was going to be erotic and exciting and creative and all these ideas. And it was very scientific and hard data, until this woman got on stage, and she had her thick brown stockings on and thick, brown kind of lace-up shoes, a white bob, and she looked horribly like my grandmother at the time, where I just went, oh, wouldn't talk to my grandma about this. And she just threw the books on the podium and she said, right, I'm going to teach you all something about orgasms. And I swear to God that we all just sat up in our chair because we'd already written her off. And she showed on these MRI scans that, and she works still with a neuroscientist, that she could get people, and I don't know how they get consent of these people to have full-blown orgasms under MRIs, but that's another story, I'm sure, where people could have orgasms either through genital touch, and the brain would light up in certain ways, of course, as we all know, when it can explode or when it can get really excited and aroused and stimulated and happy. But the neuroscientists couldn't tell the difference between the ones who were imagining themselves touching themselves, imagining themselves being caressed or having a fantasy or playing out, reenacting something that they would have liked to have had in their life, or imagining them with a different body part or different lingerie on or things. And I was blown away by this research. Like, I was like, surely there would be a difference, because this was way before I got into the neuroscience and the neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotherapy. And now I've come to understand that, going back to your question of how do you start to come to feel more comfortable and confident and just reconnect or reacquaint with the you of today, once you've grieved or, acknowledged the transition, or just worked out that you want to take, you want to explore these things further. And so what we do is pretty much that kind of thing. So if somebody comes to see me, it's this sensate focus where it's just a structured program of the very first time. It's almost like just getting people to feel comfortable in the privacy of their own room or their own bathroom, just to see their bodies. And most of us can even have a few barriers or obstacles when it comes up to just looking at our naked self. And especially if it's just looking at our naked genitalia, men or women, all different ages. And it's just recognizing what's happening when we look. Is it judgment? Is it shame? Is it blame? Is it anger? Because there are ways to let go of that as well. And then it's building up to just gently touching or caressing with beautiful lubes or oils, and setting the scene so that it's a safe place to relax. It's a safe place to explore with, like you said last week, with, different materials or dressing up, but just to get out of your head of, will it hurt, and what if I don't look good anymore, or how do other people cope, and is this bad to masturbate, and will I make my cancer worse, or why am I even bothering about this anymore? I'm too old, or I'm too wrinkly, I'm too fat, I'm too ugly, I'm too skinny. All of these things that can happen in our heads. And when we start to train people or encourage them to do some breath work, so to breathe out and to be more present and more mindful in the body, but also just to couple it with sensual experiences like aromas, everything that you said last week. And it's really to set the scene, perhaps light a candle, have beautiful oils, but to go to the touch, we're training the brain to come from the head to back to the body. And so we do graduated exercises over, and then, you know, people come back and say what's happening for them. They may say, oh, you know, we jumped to week 4 because, you know, I jumped to week 4. And really it's like penetration's off, but then it's slowly integrating, touching the genitals and feeling the response. And then if desired, and if the curiosity continues, it's starting the whole thing about just exciting the genitals, and whether you call it the M word, masturbation, it's probably the greatest taboo of it all. But until you gradually work through reclaiming the changed body, until you give yourself permission to breathe in and get out of your head and feel and just notice the environment around you, and until you just put a little bit of time, I don't want to say work, but just a bit of energy, because energy flows where attention goes. So we're really trying to move from pain and trauma and shock and horror and guilt and burden and all of those things to just a little bit of joy, a little bit of relax, a little bit of calm, a little bit of excitement or arousal. And then gradually just building people up to, if they want to have an orgasm, just to explore what that would be like. Some people have never had one, but even just to feel okay with touching their skin or touching their genitals is a really good step forward for many people who have never done that. And they've either never done it because there's so many beliefs attached to, you know, masturbation or self-pleasure or oral sex or whatever you want to call these different parts of us that are really just tuning into arousal centers in our body. So if people work with me, I say it's at least 6 weeks to, but over the 6 weeks period, it's gradually the penetrative side, if that's what you're wanting. Some people don't want that, or the using toys or just to dilate the vagina. Like sometimes it can take 4 weeks to get comfortable to do anything like that, to insert anything into the areas or just touch the areas that haven't always been favorably looked upon for religious reasons, cultural reasons, age reasons, gender reasons, a whole lot of reasons. So some stuff comes up.
Amanda, I was wondering if I could pick your brains, and this is my phone a friend moment, because there were a couple of, there's 2 questions that I've got that I was hoping that you could answer for me. The first one is, you mentioned it earlier in the conversation, and it struck me that this is probably something that I need to look up a little bit more about myself. And you said, the difference between lubricants and vaginal moisturizers. So I wondered if we could address that in a little bit more kind of practical detail. But the other question I had was, after last week's talk, one of our blokes in our group, who was incredibly brave, put this as a comment in the Facebook group video, and it was really asking about erection strength and erection length of time. So, and I think the phrase that this guy used was harder and longer. I talked about lots of practical strategies last week in terms of, ways of adapting to having had cancer treatment. But I realised that I probably was a little bit bashful about talking about that last week. And I thought, no, I'm going to be brave and let's raise this. Let's put to
my screen so that because I've brought up I've got one slide of just different lubes and moisturizers. Am I able
to? You can share your screen. Yeah, for sure. We demonstrated this a couple of weeks ago. It's I was scared the first time we did it because Facebook and are funny sometimes. But yeah, I think probably everyone will be able to see that. But what I can't see is people's comments while you're sharing your screen.
All right, so
let's go for it.
So it's a really good, to be really honest, Kate, it's a great question, because I must confess that I reckon I was in this area for about 10 years, doing other jobs as well. But I hadn't realized that there was a difference between lubes and moisturizers and topical estrogen cream. And
sorry, Amanda, when you had your head facing to the side, I don't think your voice caught. So I think you said topical estrogen cream, but I just wanted to make sure that you said.
So there's a difference. So we're just going to briefly talk about the difference between lubrication and vaginal moisturizers and topical estrogen. And I didn't understand the difference until I was working in the area more. And mostly there's it's thinking about what is it that you're wanting to use it for, and to do that sensual or the sensate focus techniques of just helping your brain arousal connections be reconnected and rekindled and resparked. Lubrication is often the thing that we want. And there are different types, as you said last week. So there's silicone based, but there's also water based, like you talked about that a lot last week. And I'm nearly always, wherever I go, asked, what's your favorite lube in the whole world? It happens to be that one there. I used to think it was called Pure because I thought that sounded really erotic, but it's called Pure because it was a German product. It is a German product, and it's I personally love the one that, you know, that long tube there, which is a silicone base, because it keeps going. It can be reactivated with saliva. It can be used for sex toys, and it just lasts and it reactivates, and it doesn't get by the, you know, the vaginal tissue. And often men just find it very comfortable and just very slick, and very like the lady in the passion fruit. There's a beautiful shop that I often refer people to called, and I'm going to show you something for the continence issues in a minute from their shop as well, the Liberator range. And so she said it's the difference between wearing nylon stockings and just sliding into silk, nylon pantyhose and sliding into silk stockings. So there's a role, but it's really personal, because I used to buy pump packs for all my friends turning 50 or 60 of my favorite, and then hearing feedback, well, it was too smooth, or there wasn't enough friction, or I didn't like how it stayed on the skin. And so it depends. And this shop is really good at just giving advice. I go to them and just say, what's the latest as well. So the Pure is there, the water or the silicone based, and the Hydra is glycerin free. So if people are more likely to have thrush or irritation, like you were talking about last time, then, you know, you may be more inclined to have the Hydra, which is glycerin free. I've tried all of these, and I still say you've got to try and find it out yourself. The Sliquid is quite thick and vegan friendly, and I've asked a lot of people, and apparently that does matter. And when I've gone to workshops, I've often been asked by health professionals, well, what about olive oil? And my first thought for olive oil is, surely that just goes on the pizza base. You know, let's leave it in the kitchen, as I imagine getting the pastry bush out and kind of dosing yourself in olive oil. And then I looked up this tiny bit of research, which is Australian, by physio, that was looking at just helping people relax their pelvic floor exercise by just massaging the pelvic floor with olive oil. And then as I was writing my book, I found this little, it was called Olive and Bee, this little lubrication that's an Australian made product again. And so I asked it, oh, it's going the wrong way around, isn't it?
Yeah,
Olive and Bee.
we might, once we finish sharing a screen, we might have another look at it, because then the video will, like the camera will be a bit bigger.
Yeah, so that what I'm trying to say is that all of these have slightly different marketing. Like the Uber Lube, there is, people like to have it in their purse. The On is like a menthol. It's got a little bit of a tingle, but without skin irritation. So it's done with natural herbs like cinnamon. It's got a nice smell. Didn't do anything for me. The Yes would be perfect for that lady who said right up there. So all of these are lubrications, and in my book, you know, I do outline just what to use for when, but they're really good at helping you navigate that, as are a couple of other shops that I can tell you. And Michelle, the passion fruit shop, is up there on the slide, and she taught me all this.
So I'll make sure that that link will be tiny on people's screen.
Oh, okay.
I'll make sure that there's a link to passion fruit in the notes. And do you know, I just out of interest, I know that shop's in the middle of Melbourne. A lot of people watching who are not from Melbourne. In fact, someone emailed me last week from New York who'd been watching, which was
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So do they do on? I'm sure there's lots of on. I haven't really actually. I'm bashful, probably slightly bashful to say, but I haven't really. I'm scared to know what will happen if I Google online stores.
But way before COVID, you know, dramas, they always put it in a non-defined envelope and they packaged it up very discreet. So it's always very discreet. And I'm not promoting them for any other reason except that they are so helpful. They never charge you, because we want to come back to the harder and longer question, which they've helped me answer as well. So this is lube. So it's just taking your pick. Obviously, the water one doesn't last as long, but some people only want water-based product that, and they don't like the idea of putting silicone on the outer aspect of the vagina, the labia, or the of the erection as well. But there are some sample packs on Google where you can try different versions, which is probably the best way. But passion fruit will send you some as well.
I'm just actually thinking that I might be able to get some samples that people might then be able to get from me. But watch this space. I'll let you guys know if I'm able to do that.
Yeah, so these are lubrications. So this is for sex toys, this is for self-pleasure, masturbation, sexual intercourse to make it more comfortable. And as you know, Kate, from the workshops you're running in this area, it's amazing how many people say that the lubrication, the advice that it's okay to use lube, especially for younger people, there's an assumption that if they're not producing lubrication, even though they don't realize that their body, when it goes into natural or early menopause, like you mentioned last week, is going to be naturally drier and that it's going to age a little bit more down there. But they still have in their mind that I mustn't be aroused, so something's wrong. So that's often what they'll come about as well. So, and then these are the vaginal moisturizers, and there's only been a few little studies that I've been able to find. There was one little study with women with breast cancer, which did a blind study just comparing the topical estrogen, which we'll talk about in a minute, but versus the vaginal moisturizer. And the whole purpose of a moisturizer, all of these things are estrogen free at the moment for the people who are concerned about that, or hormone free. So the moisturizer, the whole purpose of it is to puff up the vaginal tissue for daily comfort, for elasticity, but it's all to negate the effects of aging, and whether it's chemically induced aging or hormone induced aging, or whether it's natural aging that each of us go through. And it can be used. This tiny study showed that some women voted that using the vaginal moisturizer to puff the area up so it draws the fluid into the vagina so it feels a little bit puffier. And when there's a little bit more cushioning, then there's going to be less friction, less bleeding, less tears. And going back to that Beverly Whipple, I swear to God she did this. She also shocked me so much, but I still remember what she did. She put up these slides of vaginal tissue, and it was like looking at the vaginal tissue of a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old. And by the time you get to 60, 70, 80-year-old, your vaginal tissue is so fine that the only way that you're really going to build it up is going to be with topical estrogen cream to actually build it up. But this vaginal moisturizer puffs it up, but it's not permanent. But you know, most people use it a few times a week, and within 3 weeks, this tiny study by Leslie Shover showed that women felt that was just as good as topical estrogen cream. So, so it is about playing. Replen's just held the market for a long period, but the Yes one I've heard good, and most of them can be bought at just general chemist, and these don't provide a script as well. I haven't got a slide for the topical estrogen because even though I'm a doctor, I'm a research doctor, and I don't give medical advice. And there's so many pros and cons of putting estrogen on, you know, people's body when they've got hormone-driven tumors or they've had them in the past. However, there's great news that a lot of really top-flying gynecologists, gyne-oncologists, people who really lead the area, and that will say that within a few weeks of putting on a topical estrogen estrogen cream, it will build up the vaginal tissue enough that the hormones won't move through the body as well. So, and is that a concern for NETs, like that are hormone driven? Okay.
No. I know it can be for breast cancer and other hormone driven cancers, but NETs, neuroendocrine tumors, and lots of our group will know this, that they tend to produce hormones, but hormones don't make them grow more quickly. So that's one thing that we've got in our favour.
I'm just going to stop this share just for a minute, and I'm just going to show you one more thing about the passion fruit, which I just got up.
The passion fruit, just for people just to wind back, that's the name of the store that we were talking about.
I'm just going to quickly do share screen, and once again, I have no shares in this company, but I just love their help, and they have been around for 20 years or something. I'm just trying to share my screen again.
It's the struggle of 2020, isn't it? Working out how to do the Zoom thing.
Yeah, and I'll just show you. And I love this because I wanted to show you this passion fruit, the home and the shop. And I particularly wanted to, and I am going to come back to the harder and longer question as well. But I wanted to, because I was listening to what you were saying about the fears of continence and the actual reality of incontinence, and, you know, just feeling the smells and the odors and the oozes that you were mentioning today and last week as well. And so I was looking up this range of products, which I actually put in here. And then I found this beautiful, like it's so tasteful. It's really done beautifully, but just different ways. So I was looking up the Liberator range because they do very beautiful, sensual, like blankets and towels that all have a waterproof back, but they're velvet or satin. And then I was watching this just in preparation for today. I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect timing. And this gorgeous woman, so delicate and so tastefully, she shows you how to set up your bedroom for sensual awareness and sensual eroticism. And there are so many other products from this Liberator range that have covers that can be washed for any incontinence or any worry like that. And they look and their equipment, and they said that in this document here that the top 5 purchases out of this sensual, passion fruit sensuality boutique, one of them is just a gentle wedge that you can position your pelvis on comfortably, for the right angle and the right position if you do happen to have a partner, if you're using a sex toy, that give you the comfort and the support and the safety, and everything can be washed as well. So I'll just go out of share now so that you can see questions as well.
And I can see a few people are just, I think everyone's just, there's a lot of people saying hello. No more questions at this point. They'll probably think of them after the
later.
watching.
Yeah. But going back to the wonderful man who asked you about the harder and longer, and it is, I mean, there would be so many questions to ask him, whether it's been getting worse. Are there any times when it's harder or longer? Because you'd be surprised that there's, in the general community without any form of cancer, that 40% of people have erectile problems, which means the difficulty in having and sustaining an erection over a period of time, and then having another one, like you said, diminishes with age, but also with psychological things. And I can't tell you how many men I've had in here in my practice where it's been traumatic relationship endings or things said to them that just shrivel it up and shrink it back, as well as the natural aging process doing that. So it is really important, and I always get people to be mechanically and medically checked. And I say mechanically, just to make sure that somebody has had a medical review, so that so we know what we're dealing with there, and then what can we adapt to help you still feel erotic pleasure. Because going back to that sensate focus story that I was just to finish it, the guys in the wheelchair, and they were men in these studies in these 60s and 70s, they were able to have mind orgasms by just tilting their neck a particular way and almost trying to lick it, but not licking it. And they could have full-blown orgasms down there when science actually thought that wasn't possible. So what I'm going back to this man with harder and longer, passion fruit once again, because I guess I keep going back there because they've got lots of good ideas, but I know you can find them in other places as well. But they have these things called cock rings where you can put at different sizes, and they're just rubber of different diameters, and some of them can be like belts, like just moved into different sizes and circumferences, and some are just set rates. So some men can, if they masturbate, or if they watch porn, or if they go into a fantasy, if they start to play with themselves, they're often pleasantly surprised that they can get a bit of a spark down there, or a bit of movement in the old fella, as they say to me. So then they would put a cock ring on just to hold it in place. Now you wouldn't want to keep it there for too long because it could turn blue, but it's really just knowing. And also there's these fantastic penile pumps where they range from $59 to, I've seen them for $549. And once again, I've called these people and I've said, okay, I've got a client here, what's the difference between the 59? And they have often said to me, Amanda, it's just packaging and bells and whistles and marketing. So, but it's also that thing about putting the cock ring and then just pumping and trying to draw blood into the area. But like you said last week, there may be beta blockers, there may be, tablets that are dilating the vessels, so it's hard for the blood to move up to the tip of the penis. There may be diabetes risks where the blood's thicker, so it can't pull in the penis. But remember, there could also be mental blocks as well. So the harder and longer is a really big consideration for many, many men. And there's a lovely link that I haven't got it up here, but there's somebody called Victoria Cullen who, once again, she's in Melbourne, but she used to work for Passion Fruit, and she's a psychologist, or she's just finishing psychology, but she's set up a website support and counselling and practical strategies just for harder and longer. And it's almost got a name, something like that, but I'll give you the link for that as well.
Yeah, I can put the link in the notes. That's great. Yeah.
And I think, and then there's also, you know, the wonderful Doreen that Kate and I both mentioned. I'll never forget her doing this and me almost cringing at first, but I really get it now because, you know, men will often just, you know, they'll just write off their sexual, you know, their sexual function or sexual prowess and just get depressed or frustrated and angry and grieve, and all of those emotions are so valid. And you know, I can imagine how awful it would be to your masculinity not to be able to have a harder, longer penis. But once we start to help people shift from what isn't to what could be as a new possibility, new intimate moves and grooves, then, as Doreen used to say, you've always got 10 fingers and a tongue. And I will never forget this man that I was.
I remember Doreen telling me that too. That goes,
yeah, and I used to
bank with
because she was so much older than us both. She could get away with it.
But she had this Liverpool. Sorry, everybody, we're just going into memory lane. But Doreen had this Liverpool, very broad Liverpool accent. So she would say everything, and it was very loud. She had a naturally booming voice. Anyway.
Once you got past the squirm, like you said before, you could just go, look, there might be something in this. And so there was this man, I was, you know, saying this at a workshop, that there were all these urologists. So there were all these people with problems with harder and longer. And I was the last person on the panel again, and it was a really big night and 300 people there. And when I said about the 10 fingers of the tongue, you know, there's still oral sex, there's still arousal, there's massage, there's sensate focus, there's hugging and holding, there's breathing together, there's using vibrators. When you look at that that link that I'm about to send you from Passion Fruit, you know, there's equipment with dildos attached, but they're just very tasteful, you know, and I must say that. I would take my grandmother to the shop, as I have done in the past. But so it's elegant and it's tasteful and respectful and able to be washable and hygiene and that sort of thing as well. So I think, and at the end of this one, with all of these blokes who just wanted harder and longer as well, I had so many women who were attached to the men. So some of them were sisters, some of them were lovers, some of them were wives or partners. But they were just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for bringing the focus back to, I love the whole of them. You know, I love their heart, I love their smiles, I love their hands, I love their butts. And it's actually just helping people and couples just rediscover something about each other that you can just share, just you two, if you happen to be a you two. But it's really the only thing that we don't share with anybody else in the world. And it's that intimate connection, it's the longing eyes, it's the lingering kisses, it's the so sometimes we just need to be reminded of that. And from my experience, you know, with working with men, it's like they need to get permission, and they often jump at it, you know, just to find new ways to engage in oral sex, in just exploring sensual fabrics and fibers, in just pleasuring for the sake of pleasuring a partner or pleasuring for the sake of pleasuring themselves. And there's lots of men who don't realize that they don't have to have a harder, longer penis. They don't even have to have an erection at all to get a full-blown orgasmic arousal. Now, they might not ejaculate all the time, but they say it's mind-blowing, and sometimes they say they get shivers all around here because other bits aren't working as well as they used to. So the clever neuroplasticity of the world that we know now is that when that part of the brain isn't as active, then other pathways start to light up. And, you know, what more to look forward to than just new light bulb moments, new sparks, new areas of arousal, which is pretty much what you said last week. Just trying to have some fun with it. You're not being marked on it, you know, just giving it permission each week to build up, or just setting a little bit of time aside when you're feeling better about yourself. All those things you said were really perfect. But just knowing that it's okay if that hasn't worked, there'll be something else to just have and it's the trying and the anticipation that's usually pretty exciting and arousing, as we all know. And that's the thing about fantasies. You know, you haven't asked me about fantasies, but when it's usually lubrication, the permission to explore the body, but then, you know, what goes on in your mind? You know, have you ever thought about erotica fantasies? You know, there's no surprise that there were millions of books, you know, from many grades of shade, or, you know, what was it? The great shades of grey, something like that. There was millions and millions, but it's actually just saying there's nothing bad in having a sensual or a sexual fantasy in your head. that your partner doesn't even know about, as long as it lights you up and you're still deeply connected, that's okay. If that's what makes you happy, you can act out the fantasies. They're never usually as good as what's in the mind, but that it's just giving permission for people to explore and play, and also then going to get a little bit of help sometimes on the side, just to get rid of any of the blocks or the worries or the shouldn'ts, the musts, the hopes, the can'ts, just helping realize that there's often a way to get rid of those as well. Unplug from them and tune into a different frequency, upload a new app in the mind, and the body will go, whoa, okay. So yeah, so we're not our kids, we're not, your parents aren't watching you. It's not, you know, a lot's happened since you probably first started to be sensual and sexual, and it's just having an opportunity to explore that, should you require it, or should you desire it, or want to sleep better, lower your blood pressure, reduce anxiety, lose 1,000 calories an hour, deeply connect with a loving partner, feel better about where you are in life. You know, it's just, there's a lot of reasons to have sex and intimacy in the way that you desire. Yeah.
I think that's a really perfect note to wind it up. And I'm also looking at my time and reminding you, Amanda, that I promised that we would wind up, because I know that you've got other things to do with your day, and we could talk for hours about this. I think that the really important thing for people to note is that, like, you know, obviously we've talked about lots of ideas here, but it's really the tip of the iceberg, and that help is available. And so I feel like someone's just commented an hour. Right? That's exactly what I was thinking too. Like, an hour is a very long time. Anyway, moving right along, there is help available, and you know, there are people in each state who this is their area of expertise. So certainly having a medical check and talking with your doctor, and being comfortable to talk with your doctor about it, knowing that they might blush, but maybe they won't. Maybe there'll be some strategies for them as well. But also there are other types of practitioners who can really help in this area if it feels like something that you need some help. So I'm probably the first port of call with this. I'll make sure there's some links in the notes too, though, because I know that not everybody can access me all the time. So look, I'm just going to take this opportunity to thank you so much, Amanda. It is such a treat to see you on a Friday afternoon. We talk at other times, but we don't often talk about this anymore. So it's been really fun talking with you about this, and we really appreciate your time. I wondered, do you want to, just before you finish, and I've got some plugs to do about events coming up, but I know that you need to leave us, but do you want to talk about your book?
Well, just in brief, I've written a book which links all of this together. So nearly every research article, every workshop I've run, it's always be aware of your attitudes, beliefs, and assumptions, either whether you're the one with the cancer, whether you're a partner, whether you're a new partner, or whether you're a health professional. And not many of them help you overcome those obstacles and tune into a different channel, a different frequency. So yeah, so I finally wrote it all down. So I've continued the research from the research area just to the practical strategies of just resetting, reprogramming, recalibrating your mindset to fun and to joy and to desire and to intimate arousal, and giving you practical ways to just help you eliminate and just release things that may come up for you that just have the potential to slow down that progress. So yeah, so I was hoping to wave it today and show you, but it's in progress. It's supposed to be in print very soon. And yeah, if any of your people ever want to, maybe when it does come out, I can just give a link to where it's going to be, you know, just available on Amazon, and it's going to be a PDF and hardcover. So yeah, so thank you.
Oh, look, it's been such a pleasure having you along. So thank you. Amanda, you can either listen to the plug and the announcements, but I also know that you've got things to do. So if you need to press your little end button, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you, and thank you all for listening, and good luck with enjoying the curious exploration, and you know, give the olive oil a go and just let us know how that goes as well. You never know.
Interested to hear too. Thank you, Amanda.
Bye-bye.
Brilliant. Okay, so look, that was a lot of information that we just covered in the last hour, and I've just got a couple of things that I just want to plug before I finish up for the day today. The first thing to say is, for those who are watching in our Facebook group live, we've got our online Zoom group this afternoon, which is a group that we have for people who are in the Facebook group for a chance to have a live you know, in-person conversation. So that is this afternoon. It's at 2:30 Melbourne time. I'm aware I've not put the link to the Zoom room up in the event space yet, because there's been a few pots on boil on the stove, but I'm definitely before 2:30 the link will be there in the Facebook event. I know we've got some new people to our group. Actually, lots of people have joined the group this week. I'm not sure how you've all found us, but if you have no idea what I'm talking about, take your time. These meetings happen once a month, either on a Friday afternoon or on a Tuesday evening in Melbourne time. And so we'll have another one in December. So, you know, if you're new and you're thinking, what are they talking about? Don't stress too much. You can catch up with the next one. The other thing, just to tell you, and I posted about this in the group space this morning, and I can see lots of people have already found it. I've been talking for a couple of weeks about an upcoming webinar on nutrition and cancer, and nutrition and specifically NETs, by a specialist NET dietitian, Erin Lang, who has just completed her PhD into nutritional and supportive care needs of people affected by neuroendocrine cancer. So it's pretty much, you know, you are her people. But we had a glitch with our website. The registrations weren't working, so we've decided just to push that date back a little. So it was going to be next Tuesday, and it was going to be a bit of a scramble. So we're actually doing it the following week on the Monday night, on the 30th of November, and that's 7:30 till 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time. And the registration link I've linked in the group space. We'll also have registration links available. We'll be plugging that via our Facebook and Twitter and everything, and we'll also have the link is now live on our website. So if you hop onto our website, it's in the events section. Anyone can register worldwide for that. It's free. We will be recording it, so if you're busy or if that's a different time zone to what's good for you, you can always watch it on our YouTube channel. We'll have it up in probably the day or the couple of days following the webinar. So I'm really excited to have that. But not only that, Erin is actually going to be joining us that week. So on the Monday night, she's got the webinar, which is also for health professionals as well. I didn't mention that before. So it's both for patients and for health professionals. But if you've got questions, like detailed questions for Erin, we'll certainly have some time for Q&A on that Monday night, but you might also have some later on. She's joining us on the Friday that week. So Friday week, she'll be joining us for Facebook Friday. So I'm really excited that we'll be able to talk a lot about, you know, people's questions and answers, and really nitty-gritty strategies around diet and NETs and symptoms and side effects and things. So that's going to be really, really great. The other thing I just wanted to just give you a quick plug about was that we're so excited. We've been working for actually years on a GP education program for an online education modules, essentially, for GPs, so that they know more about managing their patients and diagnosing new patients with NETs. So we are really excited that last week we were able to launch this new program. It's 4 modules, and one of our staff members, who many of you will have encountered, Meredith Cummins, has been the key project officer coordinating and bringing this all together. So I've got a flyer here for the program. It's called Not the Usual Suspects, Neuroendocrine Cancer, when it's not part of the typical lineup. So Meredith is joining us next Friday for Facebook Friday. She's going to talk us through that program so that you can give this a plug to your GPs, because we would love every person with NETs in Australia. We would love their GPs to do this program so that they know more about how to manage you and your special needs. But also, as we know, people often have a delay in diagnosis of NETs. So we want to upskill our health professionals in, you know, getting that rate of diagnosis much better, so that people are picked up earlier before it's had a chance to spread so much. So I think that's all of the things I was going to plug. So just the group this afternoon, don't forget to register for the nutrition webinar, and also stay tuned at 1 o'clock Melbourne time next week on our Facebook Friday for a chat with Meredith Cummins about the GP program. So it's lovely to see everybody in the group this afternoon while we've been chatting, and hi to everybody who's catching up with us later on. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. So take care, everybody, and I will look forward to talking soon.